Hey everyone, I'm Darshil Khunt, founder of Club, and welcome to the episode of Breakout, the show where we bring you the most raw, unfiltered conversation with founders who are changing industry from the inside out. Imagine watching sports in a bar, and instead of commercial, you see real-time highlights, scores, or just uninterrupted entertainment. That's not a future. That's stay. And the guy who built it, he went from running nightlife to running a venture-backed tech company. Today, we are joined by Noah who started in hospitality and nightlife and is now rethinking how ads work on TVs, inside bars, gyms, sports, clubs, airports, and arenas through his company TAIV. This isn't about ad tech. This is a story about taking risk, thinking differently, and betting on ideas no one else saw coming. Noah, welcome to Breakout.
Thanks for having me, Darshil. Happy to be here.
So let's start with a moment that changed everything. You were just 12-year-old, right? When your mom was diagnosed with cancer. Take us to a day where what was going through your mind being a 12-year-old and how were you able to process something like that?
Yeah, it was probably the hardest day of my life, for sure, one of them. And I just remember, after the initial fog of finding that out, we're off wanting to do good in the world and wanting to make an impact. And just feeling like this was, a driving force that, having my mom have cancer, knowing that this was going to be a part of my life, later finding out that it was terminal, I felt like, I had to do something. And a lot of people would probably choose to negative outlets and devices, but I wanted to go and do something impactful and positive. Yeah, and so I wanted to do that. A couple of my family members had been raising money for cancer. They did a cancer walk here in Winnipeg, and so I asked if I could join them, and I had trouble signing up, and so I was able to join them, but it was pretty difficult, and I needed like a parent to do it with me because of my age. And so I did it that year, but I realized that I probably wasn't the only one who was in a spot like this where you were, under 18, you weren't able to go and make a positive impact. You weren't really able to do something without your parent joining you. And a lot of people, in that situation, their parent is busy. A lot of people have a single parent at that point in life, or one is going through treatment. They just can't give the time. And so I started talking to other people who were in similar situations, who had family members who were fighting cancer. And it was a pretty common thing that they wanted to get involved, but, you know, they didn't know how. And their parents and other family members either didn't know how or didn't have the time to help them. And so, yeah, I decided to start a charity focused on helping kids who had family members affected by cancer, teach them how to fundraise and get involved in the community and have a positive outlet to deal with their issues.
That's great initiative. I know I feel that how you have felt as a 12-year-old. When I also lost my father back in 2017. I was here in Canada. It was just 3 months. And I totally get it. Like once you passed away, I was not able to attend the funeral. And that's really ignited the spark. And that's what still believe in today to really make an impact for them to show to the world what you really are. Right. So that's a great initiative for you uh, being a 12-year-old started to fundraise for your mom and then being a kid around and how they can fundraise for the parents who are suffering from that kind of life endangering diseases. I totally get that point. Now let's talk about the moment that has created TAIV. You're watching a Jet games at a sports bar and you see a competitor ad on a TV, right? Most people just would have rolled their eyes and keep drinking. What would you think that this is the right business opportunity?
Yeah, I was out with at the time my girlfriend, now my wife. And when that we were watching the Jets game, it cut to commercial break, and when it happened, she kind of commented like, wow, this seems like a weird thing for them to show. They were showing a Boston Pizza ad. It's another, national chain here in Canada, and they were showing that beers were cheaper at this national chain than in this local bar. Coming from a marketing background and a tech background, I kind of saw that and thought, wow, that is not the right ad to be showing to your customers. You should be showing things that are sold to your drink specials, your events, things that would get people excited, feel like they're getting a good value and make them want to come back. And instead I saw them promoting a competitor and basically telling people they were overpaying. And so it just started this, it got me really interested in the space. And I started doing a lot of research into what I call like current generation media networks and ad networks. And so you look at, how the radio evolved into something like Spotify because radio, there was no targeting, no control. Everybody would hear the same ad and similar things would happen. If you played the radio in a business, you could hear them advertising a competitor, and people who buy ads had very little control over where their ads would play. And then you look at how that's changed with really targeted ads during in Spotify and apps, in streaming, and even in podcasts. And it's very specifically targeted to the audience that's listening. It's stuff that the audience is going to care about. And if you're going to play it in a business, you have control to make sure that um, that you're not going to play anything that's going to harm your business. And so that same trend has kind of happened in most formats of media, with digital, with audio, but it hadn't really happened yet with TV. And so I just saw that as a big opportunity to take TV from that, linear version 1.0, where everybody would see the same ads no matter what, to 2.0, where you're seeing relevant, meaningful, interesting ads targeted to the people who are there, where you have some control.
No, no, that's great that the mindset perspective you see from a very different angle, what the other people have seen, and you decided to do something about it. So that's what the entrepreneurs do. And you said in the beginning that you might have don't have an absolute idea that how to do it, right? How to make this idea happen. And take us through that. What was the first 100 days look like of figuring it out before funding, before traction, before recognition?
Yeah, it was a lot of talking to customers. It was talking to customers and then building prototypes. That's pretty much all I did. I didn't even sleep, I don't think, during those first 100 days. But I have a computer science background, so I'm technical. So and I have another co-founder, Jordan, who's also technical, and a third co-founder, Avi, who isn't. And so me and Avi would go out and we would talk to as many bar owners as we could, and try and understand their pain points, and then we would go back and say, okay, I think this is what we need to build. And me and Jordan would go and write code until it was working, and Avi would keep talking to customers, and we'd take that MVP back to those same customers and say, is this what you're talking about? And rapid iteration. Like, we probably had 100 different versions of our product in that first 100 days, where every time a customer would say something, we would change it. And everything from large overarching functionality to tiny little details. We used to have a physical button on our box to disable it, and we thought that was the answer. If somebody, let's say our product isn't working great, because it wasn't at the time, and they want to turn it off, or there's a big pay-per-view fight and I want to turn it off, we had a physical button, you would hit it and it would light up, and that's how you turned it off. And that was our first, that was our first iteration on that. And then customers said, well, we like this idea, but it's impractical, and said, okay, what if we put that button into web software? And so we moved it there. And then they said, okay, well, can I schedule it ahead of time? And we said, okay, yeah, so let's let them schedule it. And so even something as small as, like, how do you disable the system, had 4 iterations, where it started with nothing, then a physical button, then a web button, then a schedule. And that was sort of that first 100 days for every little detail of our product.
There was a speed of execution, and there was a iteration as well, speaking to the customer and building the right product, what the market actually needs. So that was like being talking to the customer, building the product, showing it to them, let them use it, and then get the feedback from the customer and reiterate it and build it again. So you are not building a ad blocker, but you are building an ad replacement experience. So how do you define TAIV to a sports or bar owner or a bar or a restaurant?
Yeah, it's really about giving them control over their TVs. If you're a bar owner, you spend a lot of money to get a new customer in the door. You do marketing, you try and send them promotions, you try and get existing customers to come back. You spend a lot of your time and effort and money trying to get people in the door. And once they're there, your TVs are the only spot within your 4 walls that you have no control. Your music, there's no ads, it's very tailored. The menu, the decor, everything about that experience once they walk into your restaurant is completely tailored to the exact way that they want you to experience their venue. And then they have these TVs on the wall, and they have no control over what gets shown during commercial break. And so when we talk to them about our product, it's largely about that control. It's about saying, this is the last spot in your venue that you haven't tailored the experience, and let's make it perfect. And so, we talk about how you can promote your own drink specials and events, how you can choose what categories of ads are going to show there. So maybe you don't want competitors playing, or maybe you don't want, toe fungus ads playing, whatever it is. You can say, I don't want to show these categories in my business anymore. We can give you that control. And then we help turn them from a cost center to a profit center too. So we give the bar owner, the restaurant owner, a little bit of money whenever we run an ad. And I think out of all the value we provide, it's the least important one, but roughly offsets the cost of their TVs, and it lets them make profit from it, and introduces a new profit stream. So that's kind of how the conversation goes, and it's usually very well received. Like, we close about 70% of business owners we talk to sign up for the service.
That's a very big number as well. And restaurant also can make a revenue from the ads, and they can restrict the competitor to show them on their ads, right? Just give them a complete authority to do what they want to show it to the consumer as well. and giving them the right audience, like the way they can look at the ads, increase their sales and revenue. Getting into why Combinator is a huge for any startup, right? So, what was the most brutal piece of feedback you got during the YC experience?
I don't know that I would say brutal. Like it was really nice, well-meaning, good-intentioned people, and that was common between the partners, the founders. It's really smart people and hardworking with high expectations of everybody, and they weren't afraid to, give you feedback and to tell you if they disagreed with your opinions. But I don't think anything they really said was brutal. And I'm still good friends with a lot of the people from the program and the partners from the program. I can tell you some of our best feedback we got. So this was before we even started the program. We're meeting with one of our partners, Eric Mijikovsky, the founder of like the Pebble smartwatch, and we were complaining to him. We were saying it was really that same problem I was talking about earlier, where okay, we have a product that at this point didn't work that well. It works very well today, but at that point it made mistakes, and so we had this problem where we'd have customers have an issue, and they'd have a packed sports bar watching a football game, and we'd think it was a commercial break when it wasn't, and they needed a way to disable it, and we couldn't figure out what to do, and we tried that button, and we tried the web software, we tried all sorts of different ideas, and Eric said, "Why don't you just stick a big red button right on the bar and they can just smash it when they're angry?" And it was actually like the best advice we ever got. We built that. We shipped out big red buttons. It was custom hardware, and we shipped it out to every customer for years. We didn't get rid of it until probably 2 years ago when the product was finally good enough that no one was using it. And it was probably the thing that allowed our product to exist in like a non-perfect state, because it just wasn't viable for a bar to have us cut to commercial break when it wasn't commercial. That was a non-starter. And so giving them that sense of security that they could just hit this button and it would fix it, and it would send us a text, and we would investigate the issue, and we would, iterate the product based on it. It was probably one of the best pieces of advice that we ever got.
That's very great customer feedback loop, that rather than going very detailed about in the app or anything like that, it's just a red button, you push it, you also get a notification, you can deep down look in what the issue is and get solved. And you have been build a like a two-sided marketplace problem, right? You need venues to attract advertisers, but need advertisers to attract venues as well. How did you break into that?
Yeah. Initially, we didn't think we were building a marketplace. So initially, we thought we were building a SaaS product for restaurants. We thought they would pay us a monthly fee. There'd be no third-party advertising. We pivoted during COVID and then faced that chicken and egg problem where we could see very early on that there was a lot of demand from advertisers. That wasn't going to be even really a product market fit problem. Like there's always ad demand, but it was a scale problem where we needed thousands or more locations for it to be really interesting to big advertisers. And without those big advertisers, it would be really tough to subsidize it, to make any money to be able to fund operations because the restaurants weren't paying us. I mean, somebody once said this, and I think it's true. If you have a chicken and egg problem, you got to go find a chicken or an egg. And that's sort of what we did. We just went out and signed up 50 bars, and we told them you're probably not going to make any money for a while, but here's why you should do this. And they signed up. We just went door to door, and then we would literally go across the street to these small businesses running next to these bars and say, "Hey, do you want to advertise down the street at Joe's bar?" And they'd say, "Okay, sure." And okay, it's a couple $100 a month. What do you think? And they'd sign up. And that was literally our sales motion for like, I don't know, 6 months, 9 months, was sign up a bar, then go door to door at all the businesses walking distance from that bar, sign up a couple advertisers, repeat. It was a completely unscalable way to do it, but it did get it off the ground. And then, we had some couple $100,000 in annual revenue. We had 50 bars. We took that, using that revenue, we were able to go convince more bars to sign up. Then we had a couple hundred bars. We could convince bigger advertisers to sign up. Then we had more revenue, more bars, more revenue. And we sort of got these double-sided network effects that once you break through them are a very good thing for a business.
You have been the location-based ad, that it's great that people who are coming into that specific bar, they will be going around that specific around the locations as well, and that businesses can get revenue from that as well, right? So it was figuring out the things initial stage and reaching out to more bars to sign up with that same initiative, right? And most people underestimate how hard hardware plus software plus media is. What was the hardest technical challenge you have faced while building TAIV?
Yeah, this was a remarkably difficult business to build. I underestimated it. I think if I knew how difficult this was to build, I probably wouldn't have tried. So I think my naivety was maybe a good thing in the long run. But the hardware was incredibly difficult to build. Production grade hardware that doesn't break, that works properly, that is mass producible. And if you factor in unit economics, it becomes a nightmare. Like we're still trying to get our cost of goods down, but initially it's going to be extremely expensive in the early stage. So you need a lot of capital just to build the hardware. But then the actual AI models were super difficult as well. Like we built, dozens of, I think we have 30 now, different AI models and different computer vision classifiers. And at least at the beginning, none of these were built off of, popular LLMs and stuff. It didn't exist when we started this company. And even if it did, it wouldn't have been a good use case for it. So we had to build all sorts of edge low powered hardware that could run computer vision tech and then really optimized algorithms, which was super hard and still very hard. Like we still have a fairly large engineering team just dedicated to those two things.
It's quite hard to build from the hardware plus software plus media as you have described, but it's always gain a great entrepreneur spirit that you figuring out the things along the way, right?
Yeah,
So
we when we were first starting this business, we said let's go and try and find the hardest thing we can possibly do. That was actually like our guiding heuristic in trying to figure out what to build. Was we wanted to do the hardest thing we could imagine because we thought that would be the most open space where there'd been the least success stories and also the least failures and the most room to try and build a business that other people hadn't tried to build before. And so we actually specifically tried to build something super hard. Maybe it was naivety. I mean, it actually worked out pretty well, but it definitely took a little bit longer than I think most businesses do. And I don't know that today I would take that same approach, but it did work and it was something we decided to do.
been nail, but it's definitely work out in the end, right? And let's talk about the numbers. How does TAIV makes money? Who pays you? And how also business makes money?
Yeah, we sell ads. We sell ads to brands and agencies who want to run ads on our media. We have now over 1,200 bars and restaurants. We have over 1,200 retail locations. So these are like convenience and gas stores typically. We go find brands that would want to be associated. We give them the ability to target based on, the types of people that go in there, based on demographic profiles, based on the types of content that they show, all sorts of data we have. Then we show these great ads that are, on the biggest, most prominent screens in the venue that actually get seen by people that are on 8 or 10 or 20 different TVs all at once. And then we have all sorts of measurement that we've built and that we've partnered with other companies to build that lets them actually measure the results of their ad. And so that's how we make money. We then pay the bar owners. They get about 15% of the revenue, and it compensates them for letting us show these ads. They still have control over what gets shown, and these are generally ads that are good for the environment, but they do get compensated for it. And so it turns these TVs from a cost center to a profit center.
Business can also generate a revenue from that. They also have the control over their experience that they want to show it to their consumer as well. And you have grown from zero to over 2,000 venues, right? And you have raised like 15 plus million in funding. But I'm sure it was not like just a smooth riding, raising the funding. What was the biggest oh shit moment as being a CEO?
Yeah. I don't know if we've had an shit moment like that, but we've had lots of challenges. Well, that's not true, actually. I think COVID was the biggest oh shit moment. Probably the only oh shit moment. We were coming out of Yeah, we were coming out of YC at the time. We had a paid model, so bars were paying us. It wasn't even a free product, and we were raising money for demo day. And I distinctly remember we met with a bunch of VC funds. They were interested. The next day, the NHL closed down. The day after that, the NBA and I think the NFL all announced that they were, pausing their seasons, and bars started closing their doors and saying we don't know if we're going to open. And I remember we went from having a full partnership meeting with like a very prominent seed fund that was interested in doing basically our entire round. And I got a call the next day from a partner. It's just like, we can't do this deal. That we can't do bars right now. And that was it. And I couldn't blame him. And that was the same sentiment I got from everyone. Our customers closed down overnight. They went from happy, loyal customers to like wondering if they were going to go to business and having to completely rethink the way they operated. And just overnight, everything changed.
Definitely. It was very hard part, as you have mentioned, because all of your customers has a physical location and the people are visiting that, right? And based on that, it completely changed as the COVID arrived. So it was quite something that it will be very hard for you to expect. And but being a founder, you expected the situation and reality and build out a solution based on the situation that has arisen from COVID. And the local reach acquisition is interesting. You basically acquired a competitor that was building the exactly same thing in Canada. How did you even find out and reach out to the acquisition team for them?
Yeah, they're really cool guys. So they were a lot earlier stage than we are, but they were building out of I think out of Queenston, Ontario. And so the two founders reached out and they were building this almost like as a side project as going through university. And they kind of reached out and said, hey, like, can we have a conversation? Maybe there's a way to work together. And so we had a call with them, and we were just completely aligned on the way we viewed the world and the industry and our missions. And there were two people that reminded me a lot of me and my co-founders when we were just getting started too, like scrappy, trying to build quick product, trying to get customer feedback, and being pretty successful at it too. And so the more we talked, the more we realized that what we were really doing was pretty much the same. Like, it didn't really make sense to partner, but we offered to acquire them and bring them down to Winnipeg and bring them onto our product team. And it made a lot of sense, I think, for both sides, because they got to skip 3 years in their 4 years in their journey and jump ahead to a company that was, TAIV was quite a bit ahead of them, both technically and business wise. And we got to bring on these, two incredibly capable people and a whole bunch of technology that they built that was different than the way that we approach things that we got to incorporate.
You bring a different perspective into your company as well. And that's how you will build a strong team for a longer vision of 10 years. And that's how you will see TAIV evolve much better, far to more business owners, more sports owners, sports clubs, and everyone. And you have resisted pressure to move TAIV to a very traditional tech hub and I committed to building it from the Winnipeg, right? That's not very Silicon Valley type playbook. Why it's so important to build it from Winnipeg?
Yeah, I've had a lot of people try and convince us to move over the years. Our seed fund, or pre-seed fund, tried to move us to Saskatchewan and tried to convince us to go there. YC really tried to get us to move to San Francisco. We've had pressure to move to New York, to Austin, to Miami, all sorts of tech hubs. Yeah, for me, it's really about building an ecosystem here. And I don't necessarily even know that it's the optimal thing to do from a business perspective. There's arguments of why it is, but um, that's not really the driving force. It's that I think it's important to build an ecosystem. And I think that in order to build a big ecosystem, you need a few big exits, you need a few success stories, and you need each of those employees to go and start their own companies and have a second generation and a third and a fourth. And some of them become investors and start investing in the startup scene. And that's what's happened at every successful ecosystem. In Winnipeg, we've had one generation of exits. We've had companies like Skip the Dishes, and Bold Commerce that have been successful, but we need that second generation. And so I think it's really important for TAIV to feed into that. I think we need to build up the ecosystem here. We need to show people what is possible and that you can be successful in tech here, because we have all these smart, capable, hardworking people in a city that just doesn't realize how much potential there is in tech. And so for me, it's all about that, really.
It's different because people always see that there is much less potential in the regions like Winnipeg and Saskatchewan and the places like that everyone wants to follow, like Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, Calgary, right? The tech hub. And you build something from the Winnipeg, it's quite impressive because when I also looking to start a neobank and I tried to figure the things out in Toronto at that time. I tried to figure the things out, but I was not able to get the help or the support what is really needed. And that's when I finally decided, okay, I'd already give this much of time, like a year, but then I finally decided to build it for the Indian audience. And when I went there, there was a lot more supportive startup in Indian ecosystem. Currently, as of now, as it's booming, it was quite easier for me to get a licensing, legal things. I mean, we have been incubated with a couple of the incubators as well. But as you are building from the Winnipeg, it's quite impressive. And I think more founders should build it from Canada than moving it from different location in US. And I think Canada need that perspective as well. You went from running a charity as a teenager to leading a tech company with like more than 50 employees, right? How has your leadership skills and style evolved over the time?
Yeah, I mean, I'm always learning, and I still am learning, but I think fundamentally it's pretty similar. Like, I think you need to bring on great people and then trust them to do a good job, and you need to set high level targets and objectives and KPIs and hold people accountable. Establish, chain of ownership and chain of command, so people know who's responsible for what and who to go to for what and who takes ownership over what. And then your bet is that you have the right strategy and the right people in place. And I see my job as a leader is to bring in cash, to bring in the right people, to set the strategy, and then to help people get unblocked when they get blocked. And that's it. And I try not to get too in the weeds unless people want my help, because, if I'm hiring good people, I'm hiring them to solve those problems. And I think I think a common fallacy and a common problem is that founders get too in the weeds and they get too involved with the tactical trying to solve problems for everyone. And you kind of just turn into a micromanager and you lose a lot of that leverage and a lot of that value of having a bigger team because it's really just you and a bunch of people to help you with your admin work and to bring things to your desk. To get to 50 people and definitely to get to hundreds or thousands of people, you have to really be willing to let go of that control and to delegate and then to put the right checks and balances in place so that you can make sure people are doing a good job without you having to do it for them.
So rather than being a micromanagement, you specify the specific roles and responsibility to each of the department, and you take the decision, the major decision based on that with your control. And your mom's memory still influence you, right? So how does the value you have developed during the difficult time and the journey you have experienced through it show up how you run TAIV today?
Yeah, it's really just about trying to make an impact and trying to help her legacy. Like I've always wanted to have a successful enough business that I can donate a meaningful amount of money to the local cancer care foundation and have a piece of the cancer ward or something in there named after her, after my mom. That's always been my mission. It still is today. I see philanthropy as a big motivator and a big driver in me trying to be successful. And I think that's a big thing that keeps me going. And we've been doing TAIV now for almost 7 years. That's way longer than most people would continue with a single startup, especially with the challenges we faced along the way in the early days. But I think the reason that we've stayed so motivated is because we're not really doing it for money or for clout. We're doing it to try and drive impact and to do social good. And so, the bigger we get and just as long as we see that light at the end of the tunnel, I'll always feel motivated to try and keep pushing through.
Do you still want to do something for your mom? Like you want to give more charity to cancer hospitals and people who are suffering from that? And if you will go back and give yourself advice on day one of TAIV, what would you say to yourself?
I would have really focused on listening to what customers want, iterating quickly. It's hard because knowing what I know now, I think I could have done this business a lot faster. And I think I could have done another business a lot faster too. But it's also hard to put that advice into words because a lot of it's subjective and a lot of it's just knowing how to react in different situations. But um, there's a lot of wisdom I think that comes from working with people who've done things before. And I don't think I appreciated that at the beginning of bringing in you know, either partners or customers or advisors who've had a lot of industry experience, not just for connections, but for the wisdom they bring, but also for the connections. And I think the value of channel partners is still something that I'm surprised and, excited by every day is if you can find the right channel partners, you can, leverage your team 100 times over. And it's a pretty amazing effect.
It's a never ending learning journey. You learn every day, you implement it, you execute it, iterate and build new things. Let's do a quick fire round for two couple of questions. What was the worst advice you have ever received from a founder or an investor?
To just keep building product and eventually it'd be good enough and people would start buying it because that's just not how customers think and work.
And what's something about being a CEO that nobody talks about, but everyone should know?
Well, it's a really lonely position. There's very few people that you can be completely unfiltered and open with because you need to be motivating, you need to be exciting, you need to be selling the opportunity and the vision. And so, aside from my co-founders, it's very rare that I can just be vulnerable and open with people. And mentally, that's very difficult.
And looking ahead, what was that one thing that has happened to you to consider a TAIV a complete success?
I think the value that we're able to bring our customers is just so strong and I feel really good about it. And every time I talk to a customer and they tell us how much they like having our product installed or how much they like running ads with us, it makes me feel really good and like we're, helping build something that improves the life of people. And so that's probably the one.
One last question. What is that one big bold statement you want the world to hear or you want the world to say about you and TAIV?
That we were able to make an impact and we were able to drive a lot of value and we were able to use the value and the money that we generated from that to make the world a better place.
That was Breakout with Noah, a founder proving that you don't need to start in tech to build something that changes the game. If you enjoy this, hit like, subscribe, and share this episode with someone who's thinking about their first big idea. This is Breakout by Club. See you next time.